So what happens when students leave their doctoral programs? There's actually some research out there right now that was done in the mid-1990s that showed that there's decreased productivity by the faculty members whose students leave early, because you now no longer have that student writing the papers, writing the dissertation, moving along with the next best idea. So faculty members actually have some decreased productivity, and the more conflicts there are, the less productive people are, because you spend a lot of time worrying about that conflict, trying to figure out how to solve that conflict, and then productivity also decreases. There are clearly resources that are not used very well. Student resources, faculty resources, department of the university, time, financial support, opportunity costs. If you're busy, involved in a conflict, you're not doing other things like research. There are lots of conflict potentials. You saw just 3 in those videos, which we'll come back to. And there are also very serious personal consequences, mostly for the student, because the student is not the one in power. There's also some research about the cost of conflict. Most of these data are from the cost of conflict in the business or the private sector. Stress increases absenteeism. And these are, again, this is mostly U.S. data. Managers spend 30 to 40% of their time dealing with employee issues, which then takes that manager away from doing other things. Targets of a conflict lose work time avoiding the instigator, and 53% lose work time worrying, right, about the next instance. Productivity also then is reduced. They have lower morale, they're less productive. The bottom in the middle here, underperformance, is one that does have applications to graduate education. 65% of performance problems result from strained relationships between employees, not due to problems of the employee's skill or individual motivation. Okay, there are other things that then get to be bigger and bigger problems, and not due to a student not being a good student and able to continue. Relationships are incredibly important in graduate education. John's going to talk a little bit more about those in a minute. The more interdependent the relationship is, the more each member can influence the emotional states of the other. And if you are thinking about PhD, if you're in PhD programs, and for you faculty who are in the audience, you're working with, a small group of students, and you have enormous influence, depending on the area that you're in, because you work with that student a lot. And they become almost as important as family members in terms of influencing what you think. Conflictual advisor-advisee relationships tend to get worse rather than improve if the conflict is continually avoided. And we're going to talk about approaches to conflict resolution, including avoidance, in a couple minutes. Advisors cite the avoidance of conflict and poor communication skills by their advisees as the primary reasons for relationship problems. And students often report the same thing. The faculty member just doesn't talk to them very well, they don't understand what's needed and what they would like to have. There are obviously lots of reasons why the faculty and student relationship matters. The research mentor for PhD students is a key individual in that student's life. There can be decades of continuous interactions with that faculty member. If you think about the conference that you're at right now, think about the faculty members in the room, right? Many of you are probably seeing people that you've seen for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. You may even be seeing your old advisor. And for the students in the room, when you leave Concordia or wherever you happen to be doing your PhD, don't think that you're going to walk away from Professor Beck, because in the professional society meetings, people that are going to review your grants, people that are going to review your papers, there's going to be Professor Beck.
I will haunt you for years.
Right. So that kind of avoidance doesn't work either. If you are a productive scholar, you are going to see other productive scholars for 20, 30, 40 years, however long your professional career is. And that point is often missed by students. Obviously, careers depend on good letters of recommendation. If you're a PhD student, you want a job, you're going to want a postdoc, you want a good recommendation, and the letters from the faculty who are advising you on your research are probably the primary people who are going to write those letters. And if they're not writing letters, a potential employer will want to know why not. So there's reasons for wanting to make sure you get good letters of recommendation. And we're back here to faculty power. Faculty have a tremendous amount of power over the support, the work assignments, the resources, the advice, the letters of recommendation. So having a good relationship is critically important, not only for the student, but also for the faculty member.
Now, if you think about it, if only we knew which ones were going to fail. You let 10 in and you say, this one, this one, this one, this one. The first 4, we know you're not going to be here in a few years, so we'll get replacements for you right now, so would you please leave, right? But it doesn't work that way, right? It doesn't work that way. Because the nature of conflict in graduate education is a lot of times it's driven underground, it's internalized by students to the point where it goes down there and it's like a little seed you put in the ground and you wonder, is it me or is it him or her? What exactly is going on in the situation? You might be new to graduate school, you're trying to figure your way through. It's a lot like bumping into the glass walls in the fun house, right? Because there isn't necessarily a very, very good kind of map at times on how it's supposed to work. So the problem that happens is that everyone says, you know how Beck is, right? You know how he is. You know what happened to so-and-so a few years ago. I mean, it takes forever to get through with Beck or whatever. Now, but often what happens is it doesn't stay down there. Sometimes it does. Sometimes people get through and they all get together years later and talk about, oh, remember how Professor Beck was, everyone has Professor Beck stories. But often what happens is it germinates there and it comes back out with all the claws and horns, right? All the things that get attached to it was small before and now it looms larger. And when it comes back out, it comes out at times with dramatic consequences for everybody concerned. But the people who more than often bear the brunt of that are the students, not faculty. Now, this is not, by the way, this is not a let's beat up the faculty session. Just want to be clear about that. But what is true is often the student is the one that's already in the power down position, and they often are the ones that have the greatest amount of personal outcome from the conflict. Now, what we're going to look at, if we can get that thing going at the top, there it goes, is what happens over time. Now, if you think about it, that today, if you're in the midst of a conflict or if you're at the start of a program, your options are many, right? But the problem is, if you only captured it now, but it moves like this, okay? And suddenly some of those options fall away. And you want to grab it and now there's less options. So that down the line, you get to the point where it looks like you have one option or potentially none at all. If only we knew, right? But then when we get down here, it seems like somebody says, well, you only have one choice, right? Or back here, you only have 2 choices. Or maybe what happens is you say things are said, relationships are damaged, all sorts of stuff happens. So at the end, when it comes to the ombudsperson, or it comes to the associate deans, right? There isn't much, the ability to put Humpty Dumpty back together again has dropped to 0, right? So we're going to talk, you're going to see this again later, okay? But the point being, the earlier that things can be worked, and the most constructive way that they can be worked, you're maximizing your options.